Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Don Kortz. I'm Academic Dean here at Rockford Lutheran, and glad to see everyone here tonight to talk about what one part of the high school experience and the pre-collegiate experience that most people probably consider most stressful of all, and that's the whole issue of college testing. The picture of that's changed a bit in the last year. Some aspects of it significantly, some maybe not so much. We'll talk about that as we go through, and start by taking a look at our background and results from the PSAT, and then what that leaves us in terms of where we go forward concerning SAT, ACT, college entrance, and some of those sorts of things. Let me mention as we're getting started, we are recording the Zoom tonight, and just a reminder to those of you on Zoom, please be sure to mute your microphone so that isn't an issue for anyone else. And we will be posting this recording along with the PowerPoint presentation on Counselor's Corner on the school website in a day or so. So you don't have to worry about taking notes or any of those sorts of things. You'll be able to get back in and see all the detail of what we talked about tonight through that means. So before we go any further, though, let's begin with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, this is a challenging time in the lives of our young people, especially, God, and we ask that you would comfort them and bless them and walk with them in this path. It's an exciting journey, God, at the same time, but part of that excitement comes from the fact that we don't know where it's going to end up. Lord, we need comfort in that as well. Bless us tonight as we talk about the whole issue of testing and college planning and future careers. And most of all, God, remind us that our value is in you, and that you love us dearly as your children. And bless us as we seek to use the gifts that you've given us to be the disciples that you've called us to be. In your name, amen. There's a thought relative to that I like to start with, and that is the fact that I always talk to students whenever I'm passing back tests or talking about test results, that they need to remember that they can never, as a child of God, be reduced to a number. And as we're talking about the emphasis and the importance of college testing and those sorts of things, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that in spite of the value that is placed on these tests and the numbers and the results that we get, it's not a measure of who we are. It's one component of what we're able to accomplish at one particular time and in a particular set of circumstances and so on, but it doesn't define who we are. And it's important that we remind our children of that, irrespective of what the results were on the test. Some of us struggle with these sorts of tests, and obviously we need to know that our value is much more than what that number looks like on a piece of paper. But at the same time, those of us who perform very well and find this sort of thing very easy can also be caught up in a misplaced sense of where our value really lies. And so as parents, we particularly have an important responsibility, I think, to just remind kids of their value to us as their parents and to our world and to their Savior, and realize that that's the perspective we need to start from. And from there, we can work with the various gifts and abilities that God's blessed us with. Some of them are going to be easily identified in the types of things we're talking about here tonight. Some of them are going to be identified in totally other circumstances and situations. So, but each one of us has a value because he's given us that value, most of all because we're his children first. So let's talk about our PSAT scores. We're kind of anxious, I'm certain, to kind of dig into that a little bit and get a picture of what that looks like. We're going to start with that. We're going to talk a little bit about the whole testing world in total, as well as digging a little bit into ACT and SAT and those sorts of things, and what the next few months in particular will look like in that regard. One of the things that I also want to be sure to mention is that on March 11th, a Thursday evening, we'll have another event similar to this, where we'll be dealing with everything outside of the testing arena. It'll totally be about the issue of selecting majors and college visits and college search process and evaluation process and all the steps that'll lead us then up to the next step, which as seniors, we have two events similar to this. One is specifically for financial aid and the whole scholarship application process and FAFSA process and those sorts of things. And then the final one is on the college decision-making process and the element of all the tying up all the loose ends as we get into the beginning of the senior year and the end of the high school experience. So that's kind of a picture of what's to come. Let's go ahead and get started taking a look at the PSAT. Obviously, our goal here is not only to take a look at what the scores were on the test, but also to see where does this point us from here, and what do we need to work on, what sort of things can we expect as we move forward. So that's what we're looking at in terms of the big picture. Now, those of you that are here have received your paper score, so we'll have a chance to take a look at that here tonight. Those of you that are at home, the rest of the scores will be distributed to students probably in the next week or so. I'll be visiting with them in classes and passing those out and having some conversation with them about next steps as it relates to specifically their role as students in particular. So let's take a look at what you see on the paper report. And the general information here that you see and what we'll be talking about will look very similar to what you'll see online. So obviously the content is essentially the same. So what I'm talking about here as we talk through what's demonstrated here on the paper report obviously is applicable to you when you're looking at it online, because obviously it's the same data and it's giving us the same story. Okay, so here on the right, which is the inside front page of your written report, you see your total score at the top, which is a compilation of both the reading and writing score and the math score. PSAT, like the SAT, has essentially two components: reading, writing, and math. Now they'll break that down a little bit as we go, and we'll see that as we get into a little bit further. But those are essentially the two key components of PSAT and therefore SAT. The PSAT is scored essentially similar to the SAT, but you can't get as high on the PSAT and you can't get quite as low as you do on the SAT. So it just kind of broadens the range a little bit as they get another year older and have a greater breadth of score possibility. The next score that you see in the middle areas there, where it breaks down the difference between the reading and writing score and the math score. And then as you look at the box at the bottom of the page here along the left side, you'll see it separates out the reading from the writing and language score and the math. Okay. Now you'll also see there that it indicates the percentiles for each of those three main scores that we see there. Now percentile, some people confuse that with percentage. Not the same thing. Okay, percentile means out of 100 people that took this test, how many did I outscore? So a perfect average would be 50 percentile. Half the people scored more than you, half the people scored less. Okay? Now keep in mind, as we're working with the percentiles and the bell curve kind of an idea, in the middle of the bell curve is the 50%, but the overall average range is considered everything from 35 to 65. Okay, so that's the whole average range of the big bell curve in the middle. So anything between there would technically be considered average.
Your scores?
35 would be considered low average.
Why didn't you remind me to go?
65, 64, 65 would be considered.
No, I mean to go there.
Okay.
How can you be, huh?
The next page of your handout here talks about the National Merit Scholarship Program. That program is the NMSQT part of this test. So as you take a look at the front page,
having me look at this when she
PSAT,
fucking pisses me off.
National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test.
Did he kill her?
The purpose of that is to provide a tool by which a lot of foundations can use for distribution of scholarship funds, is essentially what it amounts to. So hundreds of foundations across the country use these reports to determine their distribution of scholarship funds for what will be next year's high school seniors going on into college the year after, okay? Typically, those scores are automatically reported to those organizations. If the student so chooses, they had an opportunity to choose that when they signed up and filled out their answer sheet at the beginning of the process. And if you qualify for something, you'd be notified through that organization. In some cases, some other even local businesses have their own foundations and gifting organizations. They'll also ask for these sorts of test scores as a part of their own corporate process of establishing scholarships and distributing funds as well. So that's the NMSQT part of the test that we took. On the back page of the written handout, and this is also included in a little bit different fashion on the online version, you'll see specific question level feedback. It breaks down the reading into, this is how many questions there were, this is how many you got correct, this is how many were incorrect, and this is how many were not answered. Okay, so you add all those up and it should total that number there. Same then for the writing and language. And then the math actually has a calculator portion and a no calculator portion. So you get an idea of what the difference is for that. This section of the sheet actually gives you each of the question numbers. And you received also tonight the actual test booklet that your student used with the actual questions. So you can literally go through question by question, and this will indicate what the right answer was. It'll indicate how hard of a question it was by the number of circles that you see there, and indicate whether or not they got the correct answer.
She just shot the cop.
Or
Where's the other guy?
So, so feel free to to dig
How do
into
you know
that
it's
sort
her
of
brother?
detail as you have opportunity. That's a lot of fun to get into the specifics.
Mute your
we'll see some other
phones.
tools relative to that are available to you online that you can get into as well. Okay. Questions so far?
Please ask everyone to mute their phones.
If we could ask again that everyone online would mute their phones so that we don't, mute your microphones so that we don't disturb the other participants, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, so the other opportunity that you have, which, if you got your phone with you, I suppose you can do that, or for those of you at home, if you want to open up another tab on your computer, you can go into studentscores.collegeboard.org, and you'll have a means of logging in to your account for College Board for this test. Now, student information that would already exist there for you would be the student information that you put on your answer sheet when you filled that out. If you recall, we put our names in there and bubbled all that in. We put email addresses on there and bubbled all that in and those sorts of things. So that would be the first step that you could take to see presumably whether or not you've got an account set up there. But if not, you can use this to set up and create your own student account. The one thing that I'll always mention to kids as they're setting up accounts like this for anything having to do with testing or college, please make sure you don't use your Rockford Lutheran email account, because when you graduate, those will be closed. And this will be an account that you can use not only for PSAT, you can use it for AP,
disgusting.
you can use it for SAT, and down the road, you could be using it also for some graduate testing as well, some college graduate testing. So this will be an account you're going to want to keep for a long time. So be sure you use a different email for that process and so on. Okay, so you can go ahead and set that up. Here's where you log into the account. There'll be the same information we were just talking about before in terms of the major scores that you received for this test. Now, in this case, this student took the PSAT, and that's their score here. This is what they did last year on the PSAT 10, which is like the 10th grade version of the test that you took, okay? So that's kind of indicating for you as you continue on and would take other College Board tests.
Notebook.
Those tests will all be recorded here and listed on this same account.
Piece of paper.
One of the things that I'll mention is
Not
it
to
says,
be
it talks
rude,
about a matching tool.
You please
One of the things
your
that sometimes happens,
I
and
can't
I had to talk to a few kids about that when they were filling out their forms this time. You need to make sure that you fill out everything exactly the same every time you take the test for College Board in order for this information to be tracked. So in other words, you can't be Sam this time and Samantha on the next test. It's, you need to keep it all consistent so that they can track it consistently. They do have this matching tool in there so they can kind of go in there and look and figure out, okay, so this person here is also the same as this person here. Okay, let's combine those scores and so on. So that could be something to be helpful for you. But the key is anytime you're doing this, whether it's College Board for the SAT program or ACT, just be consistent about the name that you use, the email that you use, the phone number that you use, all those sorts of things so that you don't have those problems with accounts getting confused and so on. This is where you get into the matching tool, which is actually a little bit, you scroll down below this page right here and you get this matching tool element to use that you see circled right there. Okay? All right, so what do we find out about our scores? Actually, there's a lot you can find out about the scores online in particular, so that's pretty helpful. Again, you see the detailed scores we talked about before, your combined score. Here are your two sub-scores of the reading and writing and the math. And the scores are further broken down as we get into some of the next pages we'll see as well. They will also online give you a predicted SAT score. In other words, based on what they've seen, what you've done at this point, you'll get an idea about what the score would look like down the road if you or when you take the SAT again, if you do. And the lines that you see here, which are also showing up on your paper tests, basically give you an idea of, okay, so where do I line up in terms of benchmarks, or where do I line up in terms of the rest of the population? Red would mean that's an area that you need to kind of strengthen your skills in that component. The yellow is pretty much the break-even point, and green means you're meeting or exceeding the benchmark of where you're supposed to be. Now, the benchmark is intended to be an indication of where a student should be to be pretty assured of college success in that category, in math, in reading, in writing, etc. Okay? Here you'll see they take the scores and break them down a bit further, and there was some of this on the paper handout as well, but we talked before about here you've got your reading and language, here's your math. They do pull together what they call cross-test scores. You don't actually do a science section on the SAT, but they do come up with a science score based on some of the math problems that they had and some of the reading and writing components that you might have had that are science related. So they kind of come up with a science score, so that's included. And then here's a social studies, analysis, and history kind of score that's derived primarily from some of the writing or the reading sections that are provided as well. And here they'll give even further breakdowns in terms of some other sub-scores. They'll get into, yeah, they don't have as much detail on the paper handout. They'll get into different elements of algebra and some upper level math, as well as some analysis of sub-scores in terms of writing relative to critique and argument and critical reading and those sorts of things. So it just breaks down a little bit more specifically where are your strengths strong, where are your skills strong, and what are some skills that you might need to work on a little bit. Again, here it talks about the National Merit Scholarship Program, which we talked about before. Okay, one of the neat tools that's available to you online is the chance to get into some things that deal specifically with, okay, what do I do in terms of skill improvement from here? And so that'll be a big chunk of what happens next. What you'll notice in the online version is you'll get the entire question to be able to look at online, and you'll have all the answer choices. They'll also give you some more specifics on answer explanations, and that'll help you ferret out, you know, what it was that tripped you up if you got that question wrong, or what was it that you picked up on and accurately analyzed if you got that question right. Now, it takes a bit of time to dig through this, but I'd encourage you to look into it because this will be helpful in future testing if you begin to understand how do they write the distractors. Okay, the distractors are the options that are wrong. And here they'll give you some explanation of the things that you need to look for in the distractors. And so if you kind of get in the habit of picking up on patterns and keywords and things that help make it clear that this is a wrong choice, that's going to be helpful down the road as you're taking obviously another test and you can identify some of those wrong choices. The more of those you can identify, the better you can narrow yourself down to what's going to be the correct choice, obviously. Okay, now there's a lot of questions on there. As you can see, there's a lot of things to read and analyze and that sort of thing. So it's going to take a bit of time for you to dig through this, but it could be very helpful. So encourage you to spend some time on that as you get a chance to dig into it. It also talks a little bit about the level of questions, you know, which ones are more difficult, which ones are easier. How did you handle each of those? Which ones did work better for you? And can you figure out what it was that tripped you up on some of the hard ones, et cetera, et cetera. What inferences can I make about areas of improvement that I need to work on based on the particular questions that I missed or that I skipped, et cetera. Okay. Questions on any of that reporting component? That's really the key
Look, it's not the
element
score.
of
So we know how to check your
information
score.
that you get back on the report.
It should be like on the
Okay.
website.
AP Potential, what they do is College Board takes the material, the information on your score that you got on the PSAT, derives from that what your likelihood is of success on an AP test on a related subject. So some of you in your packet received a printed handout of the test score, the AP test areas that they felt you'd be able to be successful in. That information is available in the online version as well. See me if you have some questions about that. We'll talk about the AP a little bit later as we talk about some dual credit things and your choices for classes for next year as well. It's just kind of a hint to you in terms of, okay, this appears to be a strong subject area. It might be something that you want to take an AP class in or take an AP test in. Obviously, College Board makes more money as people will take more tests. So there's an advantage for them to encourage you to take AP tests. But it still can be beneficial to you.
I didn't know that.
Okay. Another helpful tool that SAT has, in addition to what we're just looking at in terms of the online resources and report, is what you can do in terms of prepping for future tests. And that's primarily through a connection that they have with Khan Academy. So Khan Academy, if you're not familiar with that, is a very extensive online tutorial system. And from that, they've kind of categorized their online tutorial support into components that match up with the categories of SAT. And so what you can actually do is use the connection between your PSAT scores and Khan Academy to kind of develop kind of a personalized study program for you that'll help you zero in on the things that you need to work on and not spend as much time on the things that you don't need to work on quite so extensively, okay? So what it does is that they include a number of again, full-length practice tests, lots of practice questions, and then from their information that they get from your PSAT and from the questions that you take online, they further develop a personalized recommendation for you in terms of practice questions and study for future testing. So the way it starts is you go first into Khan Academy, which is khanacademy.org, and set up an account there. And then there's a place on there where they'll ask you if you want to link to College Board or test scores, that sort of thing. So you can select that link. Then you go into your College Board account and open that up. And there's an opportunity then for you to basically send your PSAT scores to Khan Academy, and they'll use that to develop your kind of personalized test prep program, okay? And then you can just start going through the practice questions that they kind of feed you based on what your PSAT results were. So it's a pretty nice personalized test prep program. Now, one of the things I'll mention just right off the bat as we're thinking, we're talking nothing but SAT. Keep in mind, there's not a huge difference between SAT and ACT. So anything that you do is going to help you on one test is going to help you on the other. There are some differences, some of them fairly significant, but in terms of the types of questions that you're typically dealing with, and particularly if you're looking at a particular subject area that you're kind of weak in, if you spend a lot of time on Khan Academy working on problems that you've got with algebra or issues that you have with reading, that's obviously going to help you on the ACT if that ends up being the test you take as well. Okay, so it'll still help you out either way. It's not that they're not that distinctive of a testing tool. Okay, so here gets into some of the detail again about linking the accounts. You can revoke that linkage if you want to. You get down the road, you don't want to be connected anymore. That's fine. You can eliminate that. And then of course there's information on the online system that gives you a link to registering for the SAT. We have links for that on our school webpage too, if you want to use that and so on. But that's available to you here. There are some other resources that are available through the College Board site beyond just the testing component that I think are hopefully at your stage going to be pretty helpful to look into, and I encourage you to spend some time with. Some of that has to do with a program called Big Future, which really zeroes in on the issue of, okay, so creating kind of a college action plan and, you know, how do I go about the search process? Where does the scholarship and financial aid component come in? But what do I need to do to get started? Big Future is one of the tools that's available for that. It's one of the more well-known tools, kind of forming a collaboration here with College Board. There's some other tools that are available that I've got for you as well on Counselor's Corner. So lots of opportunities, lots of different things to look at. So this is just one that's really available to you here because of their connection with the SAT. So you got videos from students that are, you know, talking about their college search and information from different colleges and education professionals and so on. And opportunity to kind of build a plan for getting into college and getting into the college that you want to get into and making that decision as which one's the right one and those sorts of things. So a helpful tool. This deals a little bit, the opportunity.college board deals with scholarships. A number of organizations have scholarships that are built around different types of activities and accomplishments that students make as they go through their junior, senior year, that sort of thing. Some of it can be, you know, some schools will give a certain amount of scholarship for every A that you got your senior year or something like that, or for being involved in a particular activity or being a leader of a particular activity. Lots of little, what they call like micro scholarships that are out there. Incentives for students to participate in those sort of activities, certainly helpful in terms of paying for the college bill, certainly. This is just one of the tools that can help you sort of find those types of opportunities. Again, there's some other tools related to that you can find on Counselor's Corner as well. This I think is a helpful tool for you guys to be thinking about now in terms of, you know, what should come kind of at the front end of your college search process, and that is, what do I want to major in? What kind of a career am I going to be looking at? And you know, what do I think I want to use as a career goal to help drive my college decision-making process? So Career Finder is a tool that is part of this Road Trip Nation organization that College Board's partnered with. Got some great stuff on there from other people that have been in those similar kind of careers that you're interested in. You can hear from them, read about things that they've done and so on. So again, another tool that's helpful in terms of making some of those kind of decisions. Many of your students already signed up for the College Search Service. They could do that when they filled out their answer sheet that they completed on at the test time, which for some of you has probably generated a lot of mail, email and postal mail as well, snail mail. You can discontinue that if you like to. You can go on and remove that. You can do that through your College Board account that we've been talking about that you'll have a chance to use now. Okay. Okay. Any questions about anything particular to PSAT? One of the things that's helpful to talk about is just where are we at now with this whole picture of college testing. We've heard a lot in the last year about colleges that have gone test optional and test blind, which are two different things. Test optional means they're willing to accept your score and include it in some fashion in their process for making the decision relative to college acceptance, but they won't dock you for not having a test score. Okay, that would be test optional. Test blind means they don't want a test score even if you took it, and they're basically going to refuse to look at it because they just don't want to look at anybody's test score. Okay. A lot more schools are test optional than are test blind, but there are some of both. So just so you're familiar with those terms, you kind of get an idea of what your options are out there as you begin to see what's going on with schools. One of the things I'll mention in terms of that whole topic, though, is in most cases, not all, but virtually all the ones I've been familiar with, colleges that have gone to go test optional or test blind are only optional or blind with respect to entrance acceptance, not necessarily in terms of scholarships. Okay, two kind of different sides of the coin. So in other words, they won't use the test for determining whether or not you're enrolling in their school, but they still might use the test score for determining level of scholarship that they're willing to provide for you in terms of your financial aid, academic scholarship. And one of the things I always mention to kids is recognize that we hear all sorts of things about athletic scholarships and that sort of thing, and they're great opportunities, and it's definitely a real thing, but there's 10 times more money in the grades than there is in athletic scholarships. Probably more than 10 times more, but you get the idea. So the issue of where we're at with the test score and how that's used for scholarship determination is still a significant factor. It's still something that's significant for you to consider and to think about. Again, different schools handle it differently. Those are some of the questions that you're going to want to ask. So when people get to the point of saying, well, if the schools I'm looking at are test optional, does that mean I don't have to take a test anymore? Well, it can, but it could also still be wise for you to do that if your school is going to use that as some of their determination for scholarships and financial aid, okay? One of the other things that comes up as we're talking about testing has to do with, okay, so there's this issue of SAT and ACT. For years and years and years, 30, 40, 50 years, the general paradigm of what's been typical in the college testing world has been that if you're interested in going to a school on one of the coasts, you'd want to take the SAT. Because SAT was a predominant test that was required, expected, preferred by schools both along the West Coast and the East Coast. Ivy League schools and University of California schools, et cetera. Whereas much more common that schools anywhere between those two extremes would be more familiar with and more comfortable with and typically primarily accepting of ACT. Not totally disconnected from the fact that College Board is headquartered in New Jersey and ACT is headquartered in Iowa. You kind of get a bit of a picture there. Today, virtually any college will accept either test. So that element in terms of which one is required is kind of off the table. However, it's also safe to assume, however, most of those schools in the Midwest that are going to be the ones that many of our students are going to be primarily connecting with are a whole lot more familiar with ACT than they are SAT because that's a test they've been using for the last 40 years. So kind of keep that in mind as you're thinking about what school you want to apply to. Yeah, one of the factors to make note of is which test are they more familiar with, which test is obviously more prominent and predominant in terms of their students that enroll. The other thing that's kind of messed up the situation for us in terms of citizens of Illinois is the fact that the state of Illinois pays for all the seniors in the state of Illinois to take one of the college entrance tests. And for 12 years, that test was the ACT because that's who had the contract. And periodically, the state would rebid the contract. The last time they rebid the contract, SAT underbid. And so that's why the test changed in Illinois. It has absolutely nothing to do with anything educational. It has absolutely nothing to do with what tests the colleges in Illinois are still more familiar with, which for most of them is still the ACT. It's just the fact that they underbid the contract. When it comes up again in a couple of years, it could go the other way and who knows, okay? So that's really at the crux of what's going on with the testing in the state of Illinois. My point there being, we hear more about SAT now because that's what's done in public schools. It's very likely that the ACT is still going to be more familiar to the schools that you're applying to if you're going anywhere in the Midwest. Questions on anything relative to that? It's only paid for public school students. Our students have to pay for either one no matter what they take. Now, and one of the things that gets confusing too is we do offer both tests here. However, we are simply a facility that they essentially use for a Saturday morning to offer their tests. We don't get anything out of it other than the fact that our kids can come here and take the test then and hopefully do better because they're in a comfortable and familiar environment, that sort of thing. So we offer both ACT and SAT here in our building, but we don't have anything to do with the registration of it, the scheduling of it, or anything. All that happens through collegeboard.org or act.org. Okay, so that process always happens directly through the testing organization. Those links again are available on College Corner, Counselor's Corner, which you can see on our website. So does that? Okay, so the ultimate question then becomes, all right, so which tests should my student take? Well, some of it you should take into consideration the school that you're looking to go to or the schools that you're looking to go to and which tests are they more familiar with. And again, typically in the Midwest here, it's going to be ACT. Other things to keep in mind though, however, is that while the tests in terms of their question format and basic element in that regard are pretty similar, there are some distinctions between the two tests. One of the distinctions is the fact that the SAT is really only two tests. It's the reading writing test and the math. So there's only two scores. And the two scores weigh equally in determining the composite. Half your composite is the reading and writing. So in a sense, it's like you took those two and shrunk them down into one, and then you kind of made math literally half of your composite score for the SAT. Now, most people would say, it seems logical then that if you're a strong math student, SAT would be to your advantage because math is half the test in terms of the composite score. ACT, on the other hand, has an English component, a reading component, a science component, and a math component. And so you got 4 subscores that then compile into the composite. In some cases, then students would say, okay, so if math is not so much your thing, it might be better to take the ACT because math is only 1/4 of your composite score instead of half. I'd say that's something significant to consider. Believe it or not, I've heard from some kids that have said, yes, that's true. However, some kids have said they think the math on the ACT is harder than SAT. So irregardless, even if it is, it's only 1/4 of the composite instead of half. So take that for what it's worth. Some kids have purposely taken both and then used whichever ones they felt they did better with. It costs a little bit more, but keep in mind that for many schools, you know, the difference between, you know, a 26 and a 28 on the ACT, yeah, that could be $5,000 a year in scholarships. So, you know, and as you compare the two tests, if you can score a little bit higher in one than you can in the other, that could be significant for you in terms of some scholarship funding. So those are, yeah, so some of the elements to consider. So there's no real easy answer. Nothing wrong with taking both. Yeah, it's going to cost you an extra $50 every time you take one, ballpark. But, you know, if it could mean a couple $1,000s a year in terms of additional scholarship money, especially, that's going to be worth $50. That's a good return on investment. So, other questions on that? Okay. Anything else relative to testing at all that comes to mind that we'd want to ask about? I do encourage kids to take the spring ACT and SAT tests. Particularly, we've got one coming up here in February. We'll also be doing the April and the June ACTs, and we've got an SAT coming up, and then there'll be another SAT later in June or July too. Right? They kind of run together after a while, but there's a couple of each of them coming up. The benefit of the June is simply the fact that you've got an entire junior year under your belt. So having another couple months of pre-calc, another couple months of science, another couple months of English, that sort of thing can be helpful for you in terms of taking the June instead of the April. Some people like doing the April and then the June. Kind of let's get the bugs worked out and get the nerves worked out in the April test, and then take another one in June and see what happens. Nothing wrong with, you know, with considering taking again in August, September. There are tests that are available then as well. And typically you'll get the results back before college deadlines. Most college deadlines are not until November 1st. So in terms of early application, November 1st is the most common early application deadline. And if you take those early fall tests, you'll get the results back before the November 1st deadline. So that could be an okay option for you. Okay. So repeating the tests and that sort of thing is certainly a helpful thing to do too, just to, you know, kind of get some more practice at it. Another thing I'll mention, and this will be something I've already talked to your kids about. There's a handout back there about it. In addition to what you've seen up here in terms of the College Board Khan Academy program, we've got some pretty good test prep tools available on our school website as well. It's through our Illinois ILCIS, Career Information System, Illinois Career Information System. There's a link to it on our Counselor's Corner. I've showed your students the program before, so they're familiar with it. It has a component for doing some search of what some of their interests are, skills inventory, interest inventory, career cluster inventory, those sorts of things. Then there's some tools for just searching out different career options, similar to some of what you saw up here. You know, clicking on this particular career, here's a video, an interview with the person that does that career. Here's some statistics on that career, et cetera. And so the idea is you kind of think about, what am I interested in? What sort of careers could that lead me to? Then there's another whole tool for college search. You can go into the system and say, I want a big school, small school. I want it located this place geographically. I want public, I want private, I want sports or no sports. This is the major that I want, et cetera. You go through and make about 7 or 8 decisions, and then it provides you with a long list of, or a short list, depending upon the criteria that you put in, of schools that meet all your criteria. You can back up and change your criteria a little bit if you need a longer list, or if you need to shorten it up, you can change your criteria a little bit, that sort of thing. But the idea is it's a great tool for going through and figuring out, okay, so where do I begin to look for schools? So you can plug in something like medical, small school, Midwest, private, and get a list that meets all those criteria, okay? Something that I'll put out there too, and we'll talk about this a little bit more next time, but one thing I always caution people about is they're doing a college search thing. A lot of people think, you know what, I spent so much money on education at Rockford Lutheran, there's no way I'm gonna have enough money to pay to send my kid to private college. That's really not true, because I could easily find you a list of people that are going to a private university for a lot less than they'd be going to a state school. In Illinois, it's particularly common because Illinois state education funding is not all that great. And so you can probably go to a Wisconsin school cheaper than you go to an Illinois school. But the point being, you know, as you think about the kind of culture, school culture in which your student thrives, if something like what they've experienced here at Rockford Lutheran works well for them, then, you know, you're going to be looking primarily for a smaller private university. Don't think that's not an option just because they're private and they're expensive. Yeah, that is the case, but one of the realities of college today especially is nobody pays a sticker price. So we'll talk about that a lot more in March when we focus on that in particular, okay? Okay, anything else relative to colleges, testing, taking tests, what to sign up for, how to do it? Oh, the other thing I was going to mention that's also in Counselor's Corner on an Illinois Career Information System is a complete test prep system from Peterson. Peterson's been doing test prep for like 50 years. There's a complete system on there for both an ACT test and an SAT test. Complete sample tests, multiple complete sample tests, and instruction courses for you to go through that's similar to what we talked about with Khan Academy. You go in and you take a 15, 20-minute test, and they tell you, oh, okay, you need to spend a lot of time on your geometry. Or, okay, you need to spend a lot of time on your grammar skills and language arts skills, that kind of thing. And so then they'll start really a prescribed tutorial for you that's centered around those particular skills you need to work on. Now, great, sounds great, and it is. It's a whole lot better than buying the books, because you buy the book and you just read the whole book, right? In this case, you sort of buy the book, but you only read the part that you need to read because this is the part you need to work on. So it helps target your time and your focus much more effectively. However, the thing that I'll tell people anytime, don't presume you can go buy the book, spend 3, 4, 5 hours on it, open up Counselor's Corner, spend 3 or 4 or 5 hours on the Peterson's online program, 4 or 5 hours in Khan Academy, and assume that your score is going to go from a 24 to a 28. Yeah, it's not going to happen, okay? Why do the programs work that say they work? Okay, Huntington, you know, you see all sorts of things out about great test prep programs at Huntington and other organizations like that. I'm not saying they're not, but why do they work? Because you buy a program for $3,000 that says your kid's going to be there for 3 hours every Saturday morning for the next 4 months, and then they're gonna have this many hours of work that they have to do at home, and mom and dad's gonna make it happen because by gum, we're paying $3,000 for this, you're gonna sit down and study that stuff. Well, yeah, if you're gonna study for any test for 50, 60 hours, your score is gonna get better. The bottom line is, if you want your score to significantly get better, you need to invest the time, okay? So yeah, it's not gonna help to spend a few hours here and there. We're talking, if you want your score to go up a significant number of points, we're talking, yeah, 40, 50 plus hours doing it. Now, that doesn't obviously have to be all in the same month. It can be over the span of 2 or 3 months, but you just can continue to work on it, keep adding to it, keep working on it, and sure, it'll make a difference, okay? The key is, study wisely, and that's how these online tools can help you, because they'll help you target what you need to focus on, okay? All right, one other thing I just want to talk about real quickly, because it's pertinent for where we're at here in our school year, is rec sheets went out to students recently. They should have come home to you. Some of them I've actually already got back, and that's a good thing. But I'd like to take a few minutes now to just talk about a couple of highlights of that, because they are due back in the next few weeks. So as you take a look at the rec sheet for senior classes, first of all, their junior teachers have made recommendations for them in English, math, science, social studies, languages, if they're still taking a language, that sort of thing, okay? Now, typically, if a student's kind of on track for where they're supposed to be graduation-wise, there are 3 classes that they absolutely have to take because they're the senior required classes, and that's senior English, religion, government econ. Now, by means of our school graduation requirements, students have to take 3 years of math and 3 years of science, but then they also have to take 2 years of a flex category. The idea of the flex category is, okay, I can take some extra science if I like that, or I can take some extra math if I'd like that, or I can take some extra engineering if I like that. It's kind of a way to get kids to emphasize a little bit more of the STEM options. In our case, we also include fine arts, because that's a pretty important thing for a lot of kids in our school. But the bottom line is, once you're done with your 3 years of math and 3 years of science, you're not done. You still got to complete the requirements for the flex category. A lot of colleges are really liking the idea of seeing 4 years of math. Okay, a lot of colleges some colleges are at the point of requiring 4 years of math, or else you got to take something else before you can get in to their school. Okay, so I encourage people to do 4 years of math. I encourage people to do 4 years of science. Okay, there's your flex category. There's your 2 flex right there. If you're interested in engineering and you want to do math and engineering instead of math and science, okay, that's going to be fine, because that's going to look really good on a transcript to MSOE. So, that's why we have the flex concept, so that you can kind of target what you're particularly interested in. So as you're looking over this stuff with your kids, first of all, you're going to be paying for a full freight, right? So don't just buy 5 classes when you're paying for 7. It's my 2 cents, okay? I mean, there's a lot of senior students that don't agree with that, but the bottom line is, you're going to be more well prepared for where you're going from here if you're continuing to take the math and the science and the foreign language and so on, because you're just now getting to the point where that stuff's going to pay off. Now, how's it going to pay off? All right, this is where we get back to the AP discussion that we talked about earlier, all right? We have a handful of classes that are considered AP classes. To be honest, there's no such thing as an AP class. Well, there sort of is, but it doesn't really matter. The only thing that matters is the AP test. It doesn't matter if you took the AP class. We've got a lot of kids that take the AP test and do just fine, and they never took an AP class, okay? The only thing that matters is the score that you get on the test. So you can ace an AP class, but you don't do good on the test, you're not going to get anything except a good score on your transcript, which isn't a bad thing, but that's not the college credit you were probably hoping for, okay? So we do have some AP classes. We have a lot of kids that take AP tests without taking any AP class, and they do just fine. It really depends on what their particular interest in, what's their natural abilities in, and all those sorts of things. So that's one option for you. The other thing that we find preferable, to be honest, is the dual credit option. There's a handout over there on the table for it. So if you haven't picked that stuff up, be sure to stop by there and do that on the way out. This year we've got like 10 dual credit classes. A dual credit class is an actual college class. There's no AP type test to take at the end that's a do or die high stakes test. It's just a college class. And it has to be taught by a teacher with a master's degree. They have to be approved by a university. It has to be a college level curriculum. They have to do college level testing. The thing that I like about it is the fact that when they're done, they actually get a college transcript. And they have really kind of sat through and experienced a real college class. So in many cases, you know, they're going to get a syllabus at the beginning of class, or it's going to show up on their Canvas, et cetera. But they're gonna see what that's like, and they're gonna see what this whole college textbook kind of a thing is like, and they're gonna see what a college class is like in terms of, yeah, we've only got like 3 tests this semester, and that's gonna be our grade. Okay, well, that's part of what you need to experience if you're gonna be taking a college class. But the key part of that for me is the fact that, all right, but now, a year from now, they're gonna sit down in some university someplace, and they're gonna have a professor there in the front of the room, and they're gonna hand out a course syllabus. And they're gonna look at it and say, oh yeah, I've done this before. See, I think that's huge, because the level of comfortability and familiarity that brings to that aspect of their college experience, to me is vastly superior to just making it through a high stakes AP test. Because now they're sitting down there thinking, yeah, I did this before, I can do this again. All right, I'm not nervous anymore. You know, you might still be nervous about getting along with your roommate and that sort of thing. I can't do anything about that. But if we can take the anxiety about handling the course load at the college system and the college level off the table, then chances are the rest of it you're going to be able to work out. Okay, that's why I like the dual credit sort of thing. So we got dual credit class in English, 2 classes, a lit class and a comp class. Most colleges only require 2 classes in English, so you can leave high school with your English done in college and high school. We've got Bio 2, Chem 2, Anatomy, Physiology. So 3 options there for dual credit coursework in science. Great opportunity for anybody who's thinking about anything relative to the medical field, okay? So that's gonna prepare you phenomenally for that experience. Now, the one thing I will mention, just as a disclaimer, most universities will say, if you're trying to transfer a class to our school that's part of your major, we're not taking it. Doesn't matter if it's dual credit, doesn't matter if it's AP, doesn't matter if it's Rock Valley credit. If it's part of your major, you're taking it on our campus. So that's just normal, all right? However, that means if you survive anatomy phys with Mr. Freudenberg and you get to med school or pre-med program at the university and you gotta take anatomy phys again, I can't imagine that's not gonna be a piece of cake, because he's worked you through the ringer already, okay? So that's gonna be the advantage of that. Yeah, I didn't get the dual credit for it, but this class is gonna be easy because I've already done all this stuff. So that's a huge advantage for you as well, okay? So 3 science, you got government economics that are available to you as well as dual credit. We got psychology, and we've got a couple, 3 different levels of Spanish, depending on what level of Spanish that you're at. We got 101, 102, and 201 in Spanish, okay? So definitely encourage you to think about, you know, you as students, continue on with that stuff in math and foreign language and science and so on. That's going to be great help to you. Parents, have that discussion with your kids in terms of coming up with a good, solid senior schedule. One of the things that's not helpful to kids is to take a year off of math and then assume they're going to be able to jump into college and you know, pre-calc's going to be a piece of cake after I took a year off, or calc's going to be a piece of cake after I took a year off. Yeah, that's probably not going to be true. Okay, so, all right, so question. Yeah, the dual credit classes are all honors classes and they factor in the GPA, because that's the idea of dual credit. It's totally our credit and it's totally college credit at the same time. Yep. So dual classes cover both those areas for you. It is honors credit on our GPA. Yeah, good question. Okay. Rock Valley, if you want to submit an ACT test score, you can. if you don't do a ACT or SAT test score, you need to take their placement test because you need to place into college level classes in both math and language arts. And so you take their placement test if you don't do the ACT or SAT. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Typically, if students are interested in Rock Valley in the past, I'm not sure where they're at. I don't know if they've decided where they're at in terms of doing this spring, but we've taken students over there and gotten through their placement testing and that sort of thing, gotten through setting up their Rock Valley accounts. Essentially, in the past, after we've been done, they've got their first semester schedule and everything are all set to go. So we'll see if they'll let us do that this year or not. Okay, any other questions? All right, well, thanks for coming tonight. I'm always available to find here by phone or email or here in the buildings. Come see me if you have questions on anything. Again, March 11th, we'll be meeting again. At that point, we'll be talking totally about the whole college search process, some more information about determining majors and minors and programs. There's a lot of important stuff to think about nowadays relative to that because of the fact that so many more programs now are requiring graduate work. So that becomes a key search element when you're searching for an undergrad school. If you know, or if you have a likelihood that the career you're going to be looking for is going to require some graduate work, we need to start thinking about that and asking the right questions about that when we're looking at undergrad school too. So that'll be the kind of stuff we'll be talking about in March. Otherwise, thanks for being here tonight, and blessings on the rest of your evening and on your college process.
So you said over the next week or